Hello. This presentation is meant to be a brief introduction to the birds of Mississippi. Um, and the emphasis of the talk is to show the diversity of birds that are found here throughout a year and to discuss some of the factors that influence the distribution and density of birds throughout our state. And again, it's designed for beginning birders to sort of expose you to the birds that you are going to look for as you do this activity we call birding. But even seasoned birders probably will gain an appreciation from this presentation, if nothing else, just being reminded of some of the beautiful birds that are found in our state and why it is we go out and look for them to appreciate their beauty and their life histories and so forth. Just to be frank and to acknowledge Dr. Dan Scheinman of Arkansas, this presentation is actually modeled after his template that he had done for Audubon, Arkansas. He was gracious enough to share a couple of his PowerPoints with me, and I'm slowly trying to convert them to birds of Mississippi rather than Arkansas. But basically, I'm following his skeletal outline of these presentations. And of course, I represent not only Mississippi State University, but the Oktibbeha Audubon Society, which is the local Audubon Society that serves the Starkville area and surrounding 6 or 7 counties. With that, I am going to make available to you new birders. This is in your Canvas already, but it's a checklist of birds found in the state of Mississippi, and it includes every species of birds that have been seen here. These checklists are arranged in taxonomic order, and they're handy to have. This one's 2 pages, but they're handy to take with you when you're first learning to bird. Number one, to document the species you see, but to also get you in the habit of starting to record data about what you're doing. These checklists have a place for putting where you are, the date, the time, the weather, and who's observing. And initially, you can learn by just checking off species that that you've identified. But as time goes on, I do encourage you to kind of evolve from just checking off species to actually recording the numbers of species you've seen, and also the effort you put into looking for them, like record that you hiked 5 miles and you did it in 2.5 hours, and during that time you saw 30 of this species and 10 of this species. And when you start to do that, you're becoming a birder, and I recommend that you, rather than enter that kind of information on paper, there are phone apps associated with, for example, eBird, and we'll have a whole lecture on eBird later on, as a platform for recording your bird observations. All right, so just to give you an overview, of course, birds are dynamic. They're constantly changing, even in a place like Starkville. Bird populations from month to month vary, and this variation can be determined by time of year. You know, we have certain birds that are here only in the summer, other birds that are only here during the winter. We have some birds that are here year round. And of course, we have some birds we only see during migration movements, like spring and fall migration. They don't winter or breed here, they're just passing through. We also see birds that are moved by storms. Like this year, we've had an unusual high number of hurricanes, and some of those hurricanes and storms have brought pelagic birds into the mainland, and some of those have shown up in areas in Mississippi. And so there's many reasons birds move around based on season and also just weather. But also the state, like any large land mass, has many different geographical regions. And of course, geography is determined by, eons of forces working on a landmass to create differences in topography and vegetation and so forth. And so you'll see in a moment, we'll talk about the different geographic regions of Mississippi. But for example, you'll see that the Mississippi River has had a major impact on developing a place that we call the Delta, which is the alluvial floodplain of the Mississippi River. And that particular area is highly used in agriculture these days. But that area is also, because of its openness and relative lack of trees, tends to have different types of birds than, say, a highly wooded area in the piney woods part of the state would have. Now, within these geographical areas, you also have many different habitats. Within the pine belt, you can have open pine savannas. You can also have very densely packed pine woodlands and conifer woodlands. And you can even have marshlands and swamps, even within the pine area. So there's habitat, and there are many birds associated with swamps that are not associated with prairie meadows. And so we'll talk about habitat and all those factors that affect birds. This bird is a northern bobwhite quail, and when I was young, this bird was quite abundant in kind of open, kind of brushy areas that had a lot of dense cover. And it was very, very common to hear its call. Now, over the decades, it's become more and more scarce, and there are many reasons for that. And one of the major impacts is, of course, human development. And just in case you haven't heard it, it's named after its call, which is bobwhite. I was fortunate enough, I've seen a couple males. I've actually seen a male singing here on South Farm on the Mississippi State campus, but I got a really good look at one singing in Monroe County, just north of here. One day I was out driving a country road and I heard him call, and I looked under a tree, and there he was singing in the wide open under a tree. And I got to watch him sing for over a half hour. Just the antics he put into his performance were kind of fun to watch. So just to remind you, we live in Mississippi, and of course, the reason this is important, we're going to talk about field guides a little bit today, and maps the distribution of birds. And so you need to have a good idea where you are relative to the other parts of the United States. And of course, when you look at this map, you also need to keep in mind that the Mississippi River is our western boundary and has had a major impact on the development of biological life in our state. And of course, we have coastal border and the Gulf Coast on the bottom. And both of those serve to carve out niches of habitat for different kinds of birds, depending on where you are. So keep in mind where you are relative to other states, because when you look at field guides, like this is a typical map you might find in a field guide. And this is looking up, if we looked in a typical field guide for the distribution of northern bobwhite in the United States, this is the kind of map you would get. And it shows you, first of all, the range in a color here is purple, and it says year-round, indicating that this bird is not migrating, it's staying here winter and summer. And so when you first look at this, you might say, wow, the whole state of Mississippi is shaded in purple. This bird must be pretty abundant. And that's one of the problems with these kind of maps, is it doesn't give you any idea of abundance. Are the birds more abundant in one place than in another? And that's where these new apps I was just talking about, this is abundant data from eBird, which is it's a collection of observations from millions of people. I should say tens of thousands of people with millions of observations. And from those data, you can actually get the distribution of birds and the density of birds. And basically in this map, the darker the sort of the dark maroon purple, the denser the bird population. And so now when you look at Mississippi, you can see that we're fairly lightly dusted with northern bobwhite. We tend to have some down in the coastal, not the coastal plains, but the piney woods area going toward the coastal plain. And then we have another little hot spot in the Mississippi Delta, the North Delta, going toward the Mississippi River in the northwest. And it's hard to see, but there's a little bit of a density or smattering of them in the northeast part of the state in the Black Belt Prairie, which we'll talk about in a minute. So this gives you a better feel for where the birds are, and it's quite understandable why now, when you're in Mississippi, you don't see as many as you might in some other places. Here's another example. Here's another bird, very attractive, handsome bird that loves open country. This is the horned lark. I've actually seen it here at the Mississippi State campus on North Farm. It likes North Farm when it's not particularly planted. You often see them in the wintertime. And this is a bird that is an open country bird. It likes open muddy fields. And again, we don't see a lot of them in Mississippi, in this part of Mississippi, but there are a lot of them in the western part. And we'll talk about its distribution in a minute, but I just want you to hear it. And one thing I'll say about the sounds of birds is many times you hear birds before you see them. And so as a young birder, it's going to seem daunting to try and memorize bird calls and sounds, but it's actually going to help you find birds and actually see them if you sort of not only get used to how to identify birds based on their appearance, but try and identify specific songs and calls. And that particular song of the horned lark, it's amazing how fast or how long a distance that song can spread in open country. I don't know how many times I've heard that song and I thought, oh, the bird's really close to me, and it turns out the bird's 100 yards away. So that song tends to carry for some reason, at least with me. So here's again that field guide map of the horned lark. And again, if you look at Mississippi, there's sort of a nice purple band that shows it in the northern third of the state, and then kind of wrapping down the western side of the state along the Mississippi River into the Delta and down into Louisiana. And again, when you look at the heat map, it's not as dense in the northeast as you might think from the previous map. Certainly the Mississippi Delta is really hot with them, and in fact most of the time I've seen horned larks in Mississippi. They're very easy to see in the Mississippi Delta during the wintertime. When the fields and the crops have been harvested and plowed under, and you just have sort of cover crops starting to grow, you can find a lot of these birds just driving down a country road in the Mississippi Delta. Again, if you look over to the northeast, there's this little narrow band of them that you can also find pretty regularly, and that again is the Black Belt Prairie area of Mississippi. And Starkville happens to be near that, and so occasionally we can find them. I know a couple spots that I regularly get them here, but it's not nearly as dense as you see in the Mississippi Delta. So again, abundance maps that are based on actual observations are probably more useful to you than range maps and field guides, but most field guides are going to have sort of the two-tone or the multiple tone colored maps, and you'll just have to get used to understanding that those maps don't necessarily reflect the actual density of birds. So here are some of the geographical regions of Mississippi, and of course the distinct ones we've already mentioned are the Yazoo Basin is known colloquially as the Mississippi Delta. It's the alluvial floodplain of the Mississippi River in our state, and also on the opposite sides in Arkansas and Louisiana, it's also known as the Delta. Again, it's a highly agricultural area now, but it's notorious, of course, for flooding historically, and so a lot of birds that depend on flooding, like waders, herons and egrets, and even shorebirds are often frequent there. And then just open country birds that like open spaces with fewer trees, fewer big trees anyway, prefer areas like that. The lowest bluffs are also, these are interesting areas that are created by geological action of the river as it was formed. And these bluffs can be 300 or 400, feet. I've seen easily 300 or 400 foot drops and cliffs of these things. And they're an interesting habitat border between what we call the hills part of Mississippi, which is all parts of Mississippi that's not in the Delta. And it has its own unique birds. The Jackson Prairie and the Black Prairie are both black belt prairies, and so they tend to have birds, open country birds that are similar to those in the Delta. It's just a smaller area. And then we have flatwoods and bottomland hardwoods and different hills. And then in the south we have the Piney Woods area, part of the state. And then the coastal meadows, those kind of salt marshes and marshlands that go into the beach areas. And so it gives you a feel for that. We have various distinct geographical areas in the state, and of course some birds are found in places, these places than others. So for example, if you go up into the Tombigbee Hills, it's very easy to find, not very easy, but you can find scarlet tanagers breeding in the summertime up there in a higher density than you do in other parts of the state. We can find a few in the Starkville area in the right forested areas, but I see more of them up in the Tombigbee Hills. So that's the kind of thing geography offers you. Now, of course, superimposed on geography is human activity. So, farming is very important. Building of suburban areas and towns and cities have all impacted birds. So what we see today is not just a product of geography, but it's also a product of human activity and other things imposed on that geography. and all of that affects the birds. So when we go within an area, we can talk about habitats. So this is the Mississippi River, which of course is a boundary to the Mississippi Delta. And within that, you can find open farmland, you can find woodlands, grasslands, shrublands. Throughout the state, you can find various places where there's open water. We have various reservoirs that are freshwater, large freshwater reservoirs. And of course, we have the ocean, the Gulf of Mexico to the south. And they are home to open water birds. We have swamplands and other wetlands that can host specific kinds of birds. And of course, urban areas can also have a unique flavor of birds that are different from the farmlands. And so all these different habitats offer different things for birds, and we'll just discuss some of those. And as we look at birds, we also want to think about, generalists versus specialists. So, a Carolina wren is an insectivore that's quite commonly found in a variety of habitats. You can find them in urban, suburban areas. You can find them in woodlands. You can even find them in shrubby habitats on woodland edges. So they're very easily found because they eat a lot of insects. They're not shy about what they eat. And then, as in this case, this Carolina wren is actually eating a pecan that was broken by another animal. I think it was a squirrel, and it was eating the meat of that nut. So they're quite adaptive and eat a variety of things. And whereas the American avocet is a shorebird, has a very specific bill design, and that's because it feeds on a particular type of invertebrate prey that it finds in flooded fields. And what it does is it takes that very thin bill and sweeps it side to side in a certain motion and uses it to sort of filter out invertebrates that it stirs up. It uses his feet to strip the muddy bottom of the flooded field, or basically can also be not just a flooded field, it could be a drying pond. And it stirs up prey, and he uses his bill, sweeps it through the water, and grabs that prey. Before we move on, let's just listen to the sounds of each one. Most of you have probably heard a Carolina wren. That was the typical tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. Since I was talking, I'll play it again. They have a variety of calls and scolds, and it's a common bird. You've probably heard that bird. Most of you have probably not heard an American avocet. Now, of course, it's not important that you know what an American avocet sounds like because you're likely to see it before you hear it anyway. All right. So now let's just talk about some other particular habitats. So swampy woodlands are pretty unique. Cypress swamps are littered all over the place. You can find them even in Starkville area. If you go down to the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge, you can find swampy woodlands around the Noxubee River. This particular one is the Sky Lake Boardwalk at the Sky Lake WMA in Humphreys County. And it's a fun place to visit. If you've never visited, you should go there in the springtime for sure. It hosts some champion cypress oak trees. I think there's two huge monsters. I don't know if they're both records or not, but the fellow over there on your right standing next to one of the trees. But it's home to swamp-loving birds, and in migration it can snag quite a bit of warblers as they move through. Another thing about Sky Lake, and we'll talk about this later, is there's another part of Sky Lake that is an oxbow off of the Mississippi River, and it tends to dry in the mid to late summer, and that can be really excellent habitat for shorebirds. And so we'll talk about that again later. So one of the birds commonly found in swamplands is the prothonotary warbler. Some people have the colloquial name of swamp canary for it. It's a bright yellow bird with dark black beady eyes and a pretty heavy black bill. This is a male. The female is a little more drab and a little more green on top. But this is an interesting warbler in that I think it's the only neotropical wood warbler that nests in cavities, but there may be one other. I could be wrong on that. But they nest inside cavities of, hollows in trees. They will accept human nesting boxes, and they'll even find human objects on their own and nest in. I remember a friend of mine had an old broken crock jug on his patio, and the jug was broken in such a way that it had a hole in the side that was small enough for the birds to go in, but it protected them from rain, and they nested inside that crock. This bird has a pretty typical loud warbler song. Here it is. The mnemonic for its song is sweet, 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 sweet. Anyway, this is commonly heard in our swamps during the summertime. It's a summer breeder. And during the winter, they clear out. This is just showing you a nesting pair approaching. The male is actually offering a gift or food to the female, and there may be young inside that they're feeding. But they cooperate in raising the brood and work together to completely raise the young before they move on. And so it's a fun bird. We have, it's a pretty common bird around Noxubee and other swamplands. Oftentimes you see them as a flash of yellow, but if you keep your movements down when you're in the area, if I see one and I want to get a good look at them, I'll often just sit down. And if they're used to people moving around, they'll just gradually acclimate to you and show themselves. And many of them will come within 20 feet of you and not be afraid if you just stop moving. Pretty bird, and it's a wonderful warbler to see. It's one of the earliest migrants to see in the springtime of new warblers. Another bird that frequents swampy woodlands is the Acadian flycatcher. This bird is also found in non-swampy woodlands, but it does like dark understory woodland kind of habitat. When it does pick woodlands, it prefers sort of mixed mesophytic hardwoods or hardwood bottomland forests to be in. This is a member of a genus of birds known as the Empidonax flycatchers, and there's a group of 4 or 5 of them, and they all look very similar, the species do. They include the willow flycatcher, the alder flycatcher, the least flycatcher, and I'm missing one. I've forgotten the other one. But anyway, they all look alike, and one of the ways to distinguish them is, there's many ways, but one of the sure ways is if you can hear them sing. Because although they look alike, they all have different songs. And the Acadian flycatcher, the mnemonic for its song is that it's saying the word pizza, pizza. And let's see if you think that mnemonic is proper. Let's see. Okay, so you have to use your imagination to hear pizza in that, but you get the idea. It's the emphasis of the accent mark on the song, and the other ones sound different. Some say different phrases and different emphases. So when you get to learn these flycatchers, you definitely want to learn the sounds as well as the slight structural differences in appearance. Some of these have a brighter eye ring, and some have more different colors, a little less green or gray and a little more yellow and that kind of thing. Acadian flycatchers, when they do occur in swampy woodlands, they tend to nest on the outside of the outer branches of a tree, and many times when I find their nest, they're actually right over the water. It's almost like they're using the water as an extra protection from predators from below. And this is the cup style nest that you can find of them. I found many of these Acadian flycatcher nests just by watching the birds. Again, if you kind of see a pair, a bird or two interacting, you might assume they're a pair. And if you watch them long enough, one of them will actually go to the nest when they're nesting, and you can quietly observe them. Another bird that is not necessarily right at the swamp's edge, the water's edge, but often nests in swampy areas is the American redstart. I often find this bird, especially in Mississippi, along the woodlands that are associated with small rivers and creeks. This bird, it doesn't nest in high densities in our area, but I always find a few nests in our area, in the Starkville area along the Noxubee River. It's a very beautiful wood warbler. The males, you can see the strong sexual dimorphism between male and female. The male's pictured on your left. the black and orange one, and the female is on the right, the kind of gray with the yellow marks in the wing and tail. Now, one word of caution about sexing them is that young males, first-year males, look like females, and they only get their orange and black as they age into their second year. So young males can also look like females. This warbler, like I said, it can nest. It tends to nest in those swampy areas. But when it forages, it often is high off the ground. It's often 30, 40 to 50 feet or more above the ground in shrubby bushes, foraging on insects. It does have a distinct sound, and one of the ways I find it in the summertime is just listen for it when I'm driving slowly down a country road that borders a river that has a lot of woodlands, and you can hear this. It's kind of a nondescript song, but it's often very loud and emphatic, even though it's short. So let's see if I can play it. So you can see that song is kind of variable. No two phrases were exactly alike, but you can see there's sort of a sing-songy feature to it, and it's fairly loud and emphatic at times. And it's easy to pick out once you practice. And oftentimes when I hear it, if I hear that and I stop by the road and do some pitching, I often can bring one in view because they're very responsive to pitching on their breeding grounds. And you can bring them into view and confirm that this is the bird you think you're hearing. They also like to nest, but they tend to be nesting. They tend to nest in the forks of small trees, and they nest fairly high off the ground. When I say that, they're at least 20, 25 feet off the ground is where I've seen their nest. And you can see how well protected that nest is in the fork of those limbs. And so now let's just switch habitats. It used to be that a large part of the southern United States and along the East Coast were surrounded or were basically longleaf pine savannas. And so piney woods and savannas now, I guess we have less than 3% of that original longleaf pine savanna remaining, but there's still pockets of piney woods and even longleaf pine savanna around, and there are birds that are specialists for those areas. And some of them are my favorites because they're notoriously hard to find, one of them in particular. This is it has been on the threatened list, the red cockaded woodpecker. It's a bird of longleaf pine savanna historically. It's been on a threatened list. Noxubee tends to be on the northern end of its current range, and I forget the exact number, but we have something around under 50 colonies on the refuge. These birds, unlike other woodpeckers, they tend to nest in live pine trees with green pine trees with a lot of sap runs, and then they of course forage on different other trees in the area. It's a small woodpecker. It's identified mainly by its white cheek that you see there, the white side of the head. The red cockade is just a little tiny feature of red that the males have just sort of over their ear, and it's just a little sliver of red, and you almost never see it in the field. You'd have to have a dead bird in your hand to find it. Again, it's threatened or has been threatened, and it's found here at Noxubee. Out. Now this is one of my favorite birds because even though it's not rare, this is a difficult bird to find sometimes, especially in the wintertime. It's notoriously, these guys sort of turn into mice in the wintertime in that they tend to travel on the ground, and when you spook them, rather than fly, they just sort of scurry along the ground and hide under cover under the heavy brush underneath the pine forest. In the springtime, when you read the textbooks about this book, they say, oh, the males are easy to find because they get up and perches about 15 to 20 feet off the ground, and they sing in the open, and you just kind of have to, when you hear one sing, you just have to keep looking around until you see a little bit of movement where he's singing. Well, this is one of those rascals. He was singing, and I was looking and looking and looking and couldn't find him. And I finally looked down at the ground, and he was actually sitting on, this is a root of a tree, and he's literally inches off the ground, and he was singing. So he didn't obviously read the textbook. Okay, that's enough of that. Um, what I want to say about him is they're just fun to find because they are hard to find, and it's just a lovely song too when you hear it. All right, so another bird, of course, that we would find in pine is the pine warbler, and you can find them in pines in different situations. You can find them in fairly thick pine forests. You can also find them in pine savannas, and you can also find them in suburban neighborhoods that have very little pine, just a few pine. I've got some that visit my suet feeders, and I just have a few pines here or there in my neighborhood. I have more non-pine than I do pine, but in the wintertime I can find them at my suet feeders. The male is pictured on the left. They tend to be a little bit more colorful and dramatically patterned than the females, which there's one on the right. Um, One thing about pine warblers is they are highly variable, and some have a lot of yellow in them and some are almost all gray. But this is a very common bird. It's one that you will likely encounter when you first start bird watching, and it has a variety of songs, and this is just one of them. So that song tends to be a warble. It can be kind of dry sometimes, and other times it can be a little more musical. They can actually change the pace of the song as well. It can be faster than what you just heard. And so, but that's a pretty typical pine warbler song. This bird is fairly non-migratory. It's here year-round. Um, so you can expect to see it in the winter as well as in the summer. Grasslands and prairies, and we really need to separate these two because a lot of people use grasslands to refer to areas where cattle are grazed, and certainly those used to be prairies, but those are sort of working grasslands, and even though they're not native prairie anymore, you can still have open country birds on them. And of course, if you have some native prairie, it's actually likely to have more interesting birds because if you've got native plants around, you're more likely to have the right kind of food for birds to raise their families. So we'll lump them together for now, but there are birds that like more open country and prairie grasslands. And here's a good example. The dickcissel is a sparrow-like bird. It's often brightly colored. This is a male. You can see they sort of have rufous shoulders to their wings, and they have a yellow features on their face and breast with a black bib. Um, it's a common summer breeder. We only have them in the summertime, and I find them in both the Black Belt Prairie as well as in just open country farmlands in the Delta as well. In some places, it seems like there's one every 30 feet on the power lines in the summertime on a country road in the right habitat. And they're very easy to see. They're often on power lines, like I said, or fences around open fields, and they have distinct sounds. And I think on this audio you hear a call and then just sort of a typical song phrase. Yeah, that was not a complete song. There's more extensive song, but that's a pretty typical sound you might hear from a dickcissel. Um, we do have them around the Starkville area. You see many more of them in the Black Belt Prairie if you go out to east of town into Lowndes County and into Noxubee County in the farm areas. You'll find many more of them over there. Now this bird is a difficult bird to see, and this is why I put it on here. You can see these are my pictures, and they're poor, and that's just they're poor because I don't have a good camera, number one, and number two, this is a notoriously difficult bird to find. They're called grasshopper sparrows because in many ways their song is very insect-like. But this is a small sparrow in a genus called Ammodramus, and they're kind of flat-headed small sparrows, and these guys really do like grass, sort of pasture grasslands, and they often you barely find them 2 or 3 feet off the ground. In fact, most of the time I find them, if you don't disturb them, you find them crawling around on the ground or taking short flights to and from fences near the ground. They very rarely get high off the ground when they're on their nesting territories. Um, Neither one of these birds is fairly typical in that it's not showing you all the features you would want to see, and that's pretty typical. You got a book that says look for the orange area between the bill and the eye, the orange lores, and the bird on the left has a little hint of orange, but the bird on the right doesn't show much. But these are grasshopper sparrows, and let's see if you can hear the insect-like song. You you could hear the shudder of a friend of mine. He really wanted to see a grasshopper sparrow so he could take pictures. And we were listening to it sing, and he was shooting away. And of course, it was a windy day, so you heard wind there too. But you get an idea of the insect-like song of this bird. If you didn't know it was a bird, you'd think it was some kind of a katydid or grasshopper singing in the field. Now this bird is interesting is we don't have a lot of these in Mississippi, but in our Black Belt Prairie around basically Noxubee County area, also Lowndes County, we have this bird occasionally nest here. This year we actually had 3 nesting pair we knew about, but the scissor-tailed flycatcher. Now this is a bird, it's a beautiful bird that is commonly found in the western states, Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma. It's very abundant in those states going westward. It's a beautiful bird. It's overall white and black on top with a lot of peach or salmon color under the wings and armpits, and the tail's two-tone. And they're called scissor tails because when they sally or fly out to get insects, they spread their tail, and it's forked, and it's a very elegant looking bird. This is a pair I found nesting in Noxubee this year. The male was standing guard as the female was building a nest. Had to wait a couple hours to see the female and actually find her nest. What's interesting is you can see her nest there. She was collecting leftover cotton fiber from a nearby cotton field from the previous year, and she was using that to line her nest as well as some pine straw and other things. Here's what they sound like. Fairly typical flycatcher call. Anyway, it's like I said, it's not a very common bird. We see, I mean, this year we saw 3 nesting pair in an area, and that was the most that's been recorded in our area. This bird does nest in the Black Belt Prairie all the way up into Monroe County, Mississippi, and then all the way to Selma, Alabama, when the Black Belt Prairie kind of curls and heads eastward towards Selma, and they find them down there in Alabama as well. It's a beautiful bird, and I love to see it every year, and I'm always looking for them. All right, so now other habitats, there's a lot of human disturbed areas, clear cut areas and edges, and we oftentimes have shrubby edge habitat, and there's some birds that just love those kind of habitats. And it's not necessarily the only place you find them, but it's a good place to find them. And so a good example is something like the white-eyed vireo. Now this bird is commonly found in scrubby areas, but it's also commonly found in woodlands, so it's not the only place you find them. And you can see the vireo bill is pretty heavy as compared to a warbler. And of course you can see why this bird is called the white-eyed vireo. The eye is white. The spectacles, the area between the around the eye and the bill, is yellow in this bird, and that's one of the ways you look at vireos is what color are the spectacles. And for example, in a blue-headed vireo, the spectacles would be white. This is a very common bird in our summertime. We have a few that linger all winter long, just one or two here or there. Last year it seemed like we had a few more than normal. But again, a very common bird and a very common sound of our summertime if you're out bird watching at all around the Noxubee area. Uh, Here's a pretty typical sound. What's cool about the white-eyed vireo is it can actually mimic other birds and include some of their calls within its little repertoire of songs. So I've seen them imitate things like summer tanagers and other things like that. Another edge habitat bird is the indigo bunting. Again, this is a summer bird. You can see the breeding male is, of course, the bright blue indigo color, and the female is a drabber brown. Now, during the non-breeding time of the year, the males go from blue to being more like the females. They turn kind of a brownish. Some of them retain a little bit of blue smudges in them, but they go mostly brown during the winter time. Very common bird in scrubby habitats and edges of power line cuts and things like that. It's a very pretty bird in the summertime, and it's one of the ones I love to find singing. Their song is rather kind of erratic as compared to the painted bunting, which we'll play in a minute, but here's the indigo bunting. So the indigo bunting has a stuttering quality to it. And another scrubby habitat bird is the painted bunting. And it has a little more of a musical and more uniform sound. It's less stuttery than the bunting. Now it's also dimorphic, sexually dimorphic, and the female is shown on the left. She is that kind of bright green. And then of course the male is this gaudy painted creature of many different colors, a very beautiful bird. Now, yet again, first year males are often green like the females. It's hard to discern them from the females, and they only gain their colors as they get into their second year. We have many nesting pairs. A lot of people don't realize this bird nests around here. We don't have nearly as many as we do indigo buntings, but it's not uncommon to find. I can find, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 10 nesting painted buntings in the Starkville area. If I work real hard, I can find their nest any particular summer. So I found one summer I actually found 2 or 3 pair on our South Farm, Mississippi State University South Farm, nesting along the drainage canal there. So it's not a terribly uncommon bird, but not a lot of people know where to look for them. So, and here's its song. Again, it's a little more steady and uniform than the stuttery indigo bunting. All right, we're going on to freshwater marshes. These can be home to a lot of different birds. One of my favorites is the American bittern. This is not a rare bird, but it's a rarely seen bird because they camouflage so well. If you look at that little smaller picture on to your lower right, I don't know if you can see the bird, but they're streaked, and they often stick their head out and sway with the reeds. We call it sun gazing. And they can, if they're standing behind a bunch of reeds that are kind of brown like that, they totally disappear to our eyes. This is the larger picture is one I found near the Jackson area along a birding place called Pipeline Road. He was crossing the road, and this is the parting shot as it eased into the reeds. I was able to get this picture. They have a unique sound. I've actually heard it twice in my life and really enjoyed it each time because their song, we'll call it a song, sounds like gulping water. So let's see if you can listen to it. Here it comes. That's a crazy bird sound. And it's fun to hear that, and it carries across the water when you do hear it. Another group of birds that you commonly find in marshy areas are, of course, herons and egrets. And part of that are the night herons. They're one of my favorite group of birds. They of course are called night herons because they tend to come out at night to hunt prey, but you can also find them sometimes in the daytime, especially in the early spring. And later in the summer, as it gets hotter, they tend to go more nocturnal. But we have both the black-crowned night heron on the left and the yellow-crowned night heron on the right. Both birds, both the immatures of both birds don't look like the adults. I show you the immature of the yellow-crowned night heron on the right. The immature of the black-crowned night heron is very similar to that. They're streaked brown, and they don't look much like the adult. Again, at Bluff Lake in Starkville at Noxubee, you can see a lot more black-crowned night herons than you do yellow-crowned. My best night of looking for them, I found 64 black-crowned night herons and no yellow-crowned. In fact, I've only seen one yellow-crowned night heron at Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge since I've been in Starkville. Whereas if you go down to a place like St. Catherine's Creek National Wildlife Refuge um, in the southwestern part of the state, the most common night heron down there, it seems, is the yellow-crowned night heron. So I'm not sure why the distributions are different, um, but they're very attractive birds. Um, and these birds are the gallinules. We have the common gallinule in the upper left, the American coot, and then the purple gallinule on the lower right. Now the American coot tends to be a winter bird here. We get large numbers of them in our lakes and our ponds and our flooded fields in the wintertime. We have a few that remain, I mean one or two here or there that stay all summer long, but for the most part it's a bird of the wintertime. In fact, they're a common prey item for things like bald eagles and even peregrine falcons and other things like that will pick on them. And the other two birds, the common gallinule and the purple gallinule, tend to breed in our swampy, marshy lakes in the summertime here, and then they migrate away. And both of those, the common gallinule and the purple gallinule, can be found at Noxubee. You find them at both Lake Lechfoma and also Bluff Lake. Um, so they're common breeders here in the Starkville area. A bird that's a little harder to find in Starkville these days, it used to be more common, is the king rail. The king rail is a large group. It's a large rail, and there are many different kinds of rails. And this one is a freshwater rail. It prefers freshwater. It has a close cousin called the clapper rail. In fact, it hybridizes with the clapper rail when you get down near the salt marsh areas. Um, but in our area, if you have a fresh body of water that's marshy and you have a large rail, it's likely to be the king rail. And even though we don't have a lot of them anymore, this one was recorded. We recorded one at Bluff Lake 2 years ago now. We found one spring. Under that emergent vegetation there. Yeah. So I was told that many years ago the king rail was a common breeder at Bluff Lake, and but they did some management to the lake that altered the vegetation, and the bird disappeared for a while. That recording was made of the first bird that had been seen in over a decade, so maybe they're on their way back. Now let's talk about open water and oceans. Mississippi, like I said, we have a lot of different large bodies of water. For example, if you look along the Interstate 55 corridor up near the north, we have Sardis Lake, And as you come south, you got Enid Lake, you got Grenada Lake, and if you come on down to Jackson, you have the Ross Barnett Reservoir. If you go up to the northeast corner, you got Pickwick Lake off the Tombigbee Waterway, and Columbus Lake just east of us. All those bodies of water can be attractive to birds many times of the year. Quite often in the wintertime, they have a lot of birds, usually gulls and things like that. And then in transition, if some of these lakes have parts of the lake that dry down, they can actually serve as habitat for things like shorebirds. And in fact, this is a picture of Grenada Lake. And at times when it dries down, some of the shoreline can house a lot of shorebirds. One of the birds that you commonly find in open water, especially freshwater, at these reservoirs during the wintertime is the American white pelican. You can find several hundred to maybe a couple thousand of these on some of our bigger lakes during the wintertime. And they tend to stay mostly during the winter. I know in Columbus Lake we can get, oh, I don't know, I guess I've seen as many as a couple hundred on Columbus Lake Lock and Dam. And they tend to disappear by midsummer, but we even get a few that stick around all summer. And I don't know if they're injured birds or what, but we sometimes get one or two that stick around. This bird tends to fish in groups. They're not diving pelicans like the brown pelican at the ocean flies up and dives and catches birds as it plunges into the water. These birds sort of cooperatively hunt, and what they do is they encircle prey together. School of fish, they kind of corral a school of fish in, and then once they get them sort of surrounded, they sort of use their bills and scoop them up. And so they work together to hunt and fish, so that's why you often find them in large groups. Open water, of course, is really a great place to find gulls and terns. And now these pictures are from, well, not all of these pictures. 3 of these pictures are from the ocean area, down on the coast. And you see we got a laughing gull, adult laughing gull that's transitioning from winter plumage to from summer plumage to winter plumage. The herring gull is an immature bird. And one thing you're going to find out about gulls and some of the things that make birding complex is that many birds go through growth cycles. Like some gulls take 2, 3, 4 years to become mature. And as they mature, their plumage and their characteristics change, and they don't look anything like the adult bird. Terns are less like that. But anyway, these are commonly encountered along our oceans and beaches. But what a lot of people don't realize when they first start birding is that our big open lakes also have gulls during the wintertime. We have ring-billed gulls, we have Bonaparte's gulls. In fact, we even get occasionally some rare gulls like lesser blackback gulls. It's not a common gull here at all, but we do get 1 or 2 here or there. So it's always a good idea to sort of, as you learn gulls, to check out the open waters of our lakes, especially in the wintertime, even up in the northern parts of the state, and look for gulls. You can find some pearls. Now, let's talk about season. Of course, we have birds that are here year-round. We have some birds that are only here in the summertime. We have some birds that are only here in the wintertime. And then, of course, we have migration. These 2 kinglets are both very small birds. They're basically our smallest songbirds in North America. And they're called kinglets because they have these brightly colored alarm patches on the top of their head that they use either when they're trying to scare off a predator or when they're in jousting with each other. For example, the ruby-crowned kinglet at the top, you almost never see the red until it raises its crest in excitement for whatever reason. The golden-crowned kinglet, you always see a little bit of yellow, but when they get really excited, they can poof it up and show a bright, flaming orange-yellow crest to help, again, spook the predator or alarm its neighboring songbirds that there's a problem. These are common birds in our wintertime. In fact, I'm talking to you now early October. They're just now going to be starting to come in about the mid-October, and then we'll have them all winter long. So keep your eye out for these little birds. And they're quite common all over Mississippi. And in Noxubee, you can find both these species on any one day going into a bluff lake or any other woodlands in the area. I'm showing you some common birds. This is actually red-bellied woodpecker pair out of my backyard. They've been nesting in my yard for years now. And I'm just showing you because they're a common bird, and even common birds could be interesting. You should know that they're sexually dimorphic. The male has sort of a full red mohawk that comes over his head and almost to the front of the bill, and the female has sort of a gray spot between her mohawk and her bill, and that's one way you can tell them apart. Um, it's a very common woodpecker. You can find it in suburban areas, you can find it in woodlands, you can find it in swamplands. So it's many different habitats, um, but it's here year round. And this is just the chirr chirr call. It's one of the common calls of this bird when they're talking to one another. Again, quite a common bird year round. Another year round resident is the northern cardinal. And what I'll say about year round residents, even though birds can be found here year round, even in the wintertime, we sometimes get larger numbers in an area because even though it's year round here, some birds do depart northern areas and come down south and add to our existing population. So for example, in the summertime, I'm lucky to get, oh, I don't know, 10 to 12 cardinals at my feeders. And I remember last winter, I had one day where I counted at one instance, I counted 50 different cardinals at my feeders at the same time. So, and I live in an urban area of Starkville, so I'm convinced that most of those birds came in from outside the neighborhood with the winter. And of course, most of us have seen cardinals, and we probably recognize the song. This is just one of the songs that we comment the northern cardinal. One of the more common songs is they go purdy, 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 but you get the idea. All right, summer breeders. These are birds that only come to breed, and they leave by winter. And so I chose summer tanager, not because summer is in their name, but it's just because it's one of my favorite birds. Extremely sexually dimorphic. You can see the male on the left. He's very bright red. The female's kind of more of a duller yellow. They both have large horn-colored bills. The reason they're one of my favorites is I'm a beekeeper, and these birds absolutely love to eat bees. And just about every place, every little location where I keep bee colonies, there's a nesting pair of tanagers. And I watch them eat bees all the time. And now they really don't eat enough honeybees to deplete a colony or weaken it, but they certainly love them. And it's fun to watch them catch them and eat them. They have many different sounds. I don't remember if I've got I think this is the song and not the call. Let's see. It's kind of a sing-songy song that's not as raspy or burry as the scarlet tanager, which I'm not going to play for you now, but that's just one way how you can tell. So it's a very sing-songy song, and this is a common bird in our woodlands. Now, another summer group of birds you're going to find are the waders. I've kind of grouped ibises, herons, and egrets together here. And most of these birds are breeding here. Now, the wood stork on the bottom does not breed here. They breed in other parts of the country, Florida, that kind of thing. But they wander in the summertime, so we end up getting a lot of them in our lakes and areas, so I went ahead and included them. The anhinga is also a bird that breeds here, but these are birds that, of course, like marshy woodlands and around the edges of lakes. And at Bluff Lake, we have a rookery where they actually nest, and we have several species. I think it's 7 or 8 species of heron and egrets that actually nest at the refuge. And of course, they hunt and fish and eat different things like crawfish and other water living creatures. And of course, cattle are the unique ones in that they're not always just at the water. They also, of course, the one shown here is on the back of a cow, where they often eat parasites off the cow. But again, they're common winter birds, I mean summer birds, and most of them are gone in the wintertime. The exception is the anhinga, shown on your lower left. We always have a few that stick around here for the winter time. Now, it's not nearly as many as we have in the summertime, but if I can see, I remember the most anhinga I ever saw at Noxubee during the summertime was about 50 at a time. They were soaring in the air together. And then in the wintertime, we're lucky to see one or two that stay all winter. So that gives you an idea how the numbers drop. But don't be surprised if you see an anhinga in the wintertime. It's just a little unusual. Another bird that you find commonly throughout Mississippi, not terribly commonly, but you do find in the summertime, is the Mississippi kite. It's one of those elegant flying birds. It's a medium-sized raptor, and it's an insect eater, but it also eats lizards and snakes and even some small birds. But for the most part, they're insectivores. They love dragonflies and things like that. You can often find them around tractors that are bush hogging and stirring up insects. The kites will gather around and collect that prey. What you see on the left side is an adult, and you can see the tail is not as banded as the young bird on the right is a younger bird, and you can see the tail has a banding look to it. That's one way you can tell. And notice the underside of the wings are a little more mottled. And that's a young bird that was basically in its first year. So this is a common bird, and again, they disappear during the wintertime. There are some rare summer breeders. I've already talked about the scissor-tailed flycatcher on the bottom. I just wanted to show you that, when I do find their nest, I like to prove that they are nesting. And you can see the young, and the mother in the middle, she's got a hold of something white, and that is a fecal package of feces from one of the nestings that she's removing from the nest. She'll swallow it and take it off and drop it and get rid of it. And then just to prove that they're successfully raised their young, there's I think that's the male feeding one of his young. That particular nesting pair produced 4 offspring successfully that year, and I sort of watched them through their development. Now, some other really rare breeders that aren't found much of anywhere else in the state of Mississippi. One I'm most proud of is the willow flycatcher. I found this 2 pair of these with the help of Terry and Marion Schaefer. And again, these are similar. They're in that same genus as the Acadian flycatcher, but we don't have too many of them nesting in Mississippi, and they like to be in willows near ponds or pond edges. And here's what they sound like. Fitzbue. Fitzbue. It's a little hard to hear. All right. Now the other bird, the ovenbird, is one. It's not a rare bird at all. It commonly breeds in Alabama, but in Mississippi, there aren't any documented nesting records. There are documented records of them occurring in Mississippi. Terry and Marion Schaefer here, they're birders here in the Starkville area, have actually been following one particular area every summer for the last few years, where they've been finding ovenbirds, 1 or 2 pair of hummingbirds. They haven't found nests yet, but they're convinced that they're nesting here. And this is the sound of one of them. I went looking this year and was able to record this song. The mnemonic for the ovenbird is teacher, 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 teacher. So you get the idea. So we don't know for sure that they're nesting here, but we think they are. This goes to show you that, expect the unexpected when you're out bird watching. All right, winter residence. Winter is the time for sparrows. I've only shown a few here. There are many more than this. I've just shown ones that I've managed to get pictures of. White-throated sparrow is a very common sparrow. You find it in many different habitats, from suburban to woodlands and to roadside edges. It's a highly variable sparrow. Sometimes I find white-throated sparrows that don't look anything like what they should, and it's just young birds or different age birds. White-crowned sparrow is a little harder to find in some places. The bird on the left there is the mature adult. with the black and white crown, and then the bird on your right there at the top is an immature bird that has a brown crown. Um, they like trash piles and things like that. Oftentimes they're at edge habitat or open country with scrubbiness around it, but if there's a trash pile in that area, you can often find them in those trash piles. Fox sparrows, they tend to like kind of woodlands that have some dark understory, thicker woodlands, and a lot more cover. This is the eastern fox squirrel, fox sparrow, sort of the red version. It's a very beautiful bird. It's one of my favorite sparrows to find. And then they're poor photographs, but another favorite sparrow of mine is this little LeConte sparrow. Those are the best pictures I've been able to get of them because they don't stay up very long. And but anyway, it's a very attractive small sparrow that you can find in grasslands. One of the best places to look for it, kind of moist grasslands, water nearby. We found them at Morgan Hill Prairie on the Knoxville Wildlife Refuge if you want to look locally for them. Waterfowl, winter's the time for ducks and geese. This is just a few of the species of geese, ducks you can find. And of course, you notice that the males are much more colorful than the females. The hens tend to be drabber. Um, and again, we have many species. I think I've looked at ponds before and seen as many as 17 different species of ducks and lakes down here in Mississippi. So it's a fun time. And ducks, they're in their prime breeding during wintertime. Their breeding plumage, most ducks are. So they're very handsome when you find them in the wintertime. So it's fun to go out and find large rafts of ducks and sort through them and try and identify the different species. And this just gives you an idea of the flavor of them. Winter feeder birds. All of these birds were photographed in my yard. They're birds that only come during the winter time. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is a type of woodpecker. They love suet when they get hooked on it. The orange-crowned warbler is a wood warbler, and we only see them in the wintertime or in migration. The purple finch, again, is another winter visitor. It tends to look a lot like our house finch, which is well established all year round here, but there are differences, and you'll have to learn as a birder to sort them out. Pine siskin is a small bird. It's a lot like American goldfinch, and we don't see them every winter, and in some winters we see lots of them. I remember my best winter, I had 200 of these things in my backyard, and they were really draining me of seed. But they're a fun bird to get when you do get them. Some winters I get none. And then the bird in the lower middle is the red-breasted nuthatch. We don't get those every year as well. They breed in the boreal forest up north in Canada and some of the northern states. And when they winter, they will cache sunflower seeds, and sometimes they eat a lot of suet. And just today, I went this morning and got my first one, and today is today's October 2nd when I'm recording this, and I got my first one, and I think it's going to stay with me all winter long because what it was doing was taking sunflower seeds and hiding them in the crevices of the trees around, and so I think the bird is thinking about sticking around, so I'm happy about that. I get to watch them all winter long. All right, so migrations. As a new birder, you may not be aware that birds migrate long distances from breeding grounds. This is showing a fall migration. These are birds leaving the boreal forest of the north and heading down to their wintering grounds in Mexico, Central America, and South America, depending on the species. And so you can see these incredible long, arduous routes of migration. Obviously, those that swing out over the Atlantic Ocean there's no place to stop. They have to keep moving. And whereas others do a circumgulf migration and kind of leapfrog down through the continents and come across to their breeding grounds. The reverse is true too. When these birds go back to their breeding grounds after wintering in the springtime, they go back the other way, and their routes don't necessarily exactly overlap the way they come down for the fall. But the point is, birds move to and from wintering grounds to breeding grounds, and these are long, arduous trips. Some of our birds are flying more than 4,000 miles to migrate. It's an amazing thing for a small bird to do. And among those groups that migrate those kinds of distances are the wood warblers. These are pictures that I took, and that's why there aren't so many of them. There's actually much more beautiful wood warblers than these, but I just was just showing you some of them. There's probably, oh, I don't know, it's in the high teens to number 20 different warbler species that can actually pass through our area in the spring and fall, and it's fun to find them and sort them out. Many of them look alike. Many of them have a lot of yellows and grays and blues in them, and it's hard to separate them, and it takes practice. So it's fun to chase the wood warblers and identify them. This is one of the groups I really do love, as you can tell by the number of photographs. And this is not even, this is just a representative of some of the species that pass through our area. But shorebirds, these are birds that basically are designed for feeding around mud flats or areas where shallow water exists in gradients. You know, some areas of the water are deeper than others. And that's how they sort of sort themselves out feeding wise. They have different leg lengths and bill lengths, and the smaller birds with the shorter legs, the shorter bills tend to be in the shallower water, and the birds with the longer legs and longer bills tend to go into deeper water. And of course, there's more differences than that, but this just gives you an idea of the variety of shorebirds that can be found in our area. And there's many more than this. This is just some of them that I've seen. Since I mentioned shorebirds, I wanted to give a shout out to this group of people, the Delta Wind Birds. It's a group of bird aficionados. Mainly, it's run by Jason Huxema, I'm sorry, I got his name wrong, and J.R. Rigby and some others. What they try and do is provide habitat, stopover habitat for these shorebirds. Many of these shorebirds are nesting up on the tundra, and they're passing through our area and flying down to South America. And they really do need wetlands or drying ponds or areas, flooded fields where they can get into the water and hunt for prey, and they need it on their way down as they migrate. We consider it stopover habitat. They'll stop for a few days, kind of fatten up, and then they move on again. Now, some birds don't do that, but many shorebirds do stop over. They don't just take one flight and go. So it's very worthy of providing habitat to help these birds out. And that's what this group does. They also provide workshops on shorebird ID, which I find very useful, and they've even done some workshops on sparrow ID. And they're currently working on developing a viewing area for shorebird viewing, as well as other bird areas at Sky Lake WMA. They do fundraising activities. Like this last year, they did a big day, a Mississippi Big Day, where people birded for money and contributed their birding funds to the cause, and I participated in that. So giving them a shout out because I just love shorebirds, and I really like the fact that we have a local Mississippi group working to protect shorebirds. Some other migrants that I just love to get at my feeders. Again, today's the October 10th. I had a couple of these today at my feeders with the red-breasted nuthatch. I'm sorry. The rose-breasted grosbeak is sexually dimorphic. The adult males have this black and white appearance with the wine chest, and the females look more sparrow-like with the heavy white eyebrow and cheek mark. These heavy bills, they're very good at breaking sunflower seeds. They're related to cardinals, and they're just a fun bird to watch as they migrate through. Very few, I don't think any nest in the Starkville area. There might be some that nest further north. I just don't remember their range. What I like about them is it seems like when they first come in, I only see one or two at the feeder, and then I get up to around 20 to 25 at my feeders. And that's just fun to see that many. You can just sit in a chair and watch them, and they get very comfortable with humans. They're not shy, I've seen as many as 20, 25 at a time at my feeders when they're coming in hot and heavy. So birds also have been introduced into the United States. So, for example, the feral rock pigeon was introduced more than 200 years ago out of Europe, and of course, it's established itself everywhere. We find them in our cities, we find them in rural areas or in agricultural areas, and they're almost ubiquitous across the country. They've become a favorite prey item for some birds, like In some places, peregrine falcons in the city of New York City just love to hunt these things, and even Cooper's hawks and other things like that will try and get them. The Eurasian collar dove was introduced from Eurasia into the Bahamas in the 1970s, and by the 1980s it had found its way into southern Florida, probably by storms. And once in Florida, it's kind of radiated to other parts of the United States since. You can find them here, many different places. I've seen them in downtown Starkville. I've also seen them on the South Farm and in rural areas along farms where there's grain bins and other doves. So you often find them. And I think this is the sound of a Eurasian collar dove. The mnemonic for the call would be cuckoo ca, cuckoo ca. If you hear that, it's likely a Eurasian collar dove. Now, two other dove species that you find in Mississippi are actually they're not introduced, but they're expanding their native ranges, and no one's quite sure why they do it. And one of those is the very small petite dove known as the Inca dove. It's a scaly-looking dove that is about the size, just a little bigger than a house sparrow, so it's a tiny dove. And it's been radiating up out of Mexico and Texas for decades now. You can find it, it's definitely becoming more common in the southern part of Mississippi. I know it's in the Natchez area. I've heard of reports in the Jackson area and southward. I'm not sure how close to Starkville they've come yet. I have not seen one in Starkville myself. Another dove, and this is a larger dove. It's as large or larger than the Eurasian collar dove. It's the white-winged dove, and again, this is radiating out of Texas. And I've had one or two in my yard in Starkville. Actually, this spring we had one reported in Starkville, but we haven't had large numbers of them yet. But they're also advancing pretty quickly. And let's just listen to their sounds. The Inca dove, the mnemonic for their song is no hope, no hope. And with the white-winged dove, they sort of have a complex song that sounds like, at least part of it sounds like, who cooks for you? So let's see if we can hear that. It's the no hope. All right. And now the white-winged dove. I've got them both playing at the same time, sorry. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for y'all? Okay. Another bird that's advancing its normal range, there's actually two whistling ducks. One is the black-bellied whistling duck and one is the fulvous whistling duck, and they're both radiating up out of Texas. Now what's interesting about this map is they show them breeding grounds into, western, eastern Arkansas, western Mississippi, along the Mississippi River, but the picture you see in the upper left is actually the first record that was found in our county. Right off campus there, it was on Hale State Boulevard just a couple years ago. And these birds, we also have a big group last year that was found at the MSU Dairy Pond. They have a pond near their dairy over on Turkey Creek Road. And we found, I think it was 60, I'm going to say the highest number was 64 ducks in the group. Well, those birds stayed all winter long, so I'm not sure that this map should say just summer, because those birds stayed all winter and they never left. In fact, they continue now. And I think it's a situation where if they have enough food, and at this dairy they have a lot of grain that they feed the cows, and obviously spilled grain is one of the things these guys will eat. The ducks remained all winter long. So I don't think they're a summer-only bird. I think once there's food available, they will stay year-round. It's a very attractive duck. You can find it at Bluff Lake now. I see a few flying in all the time. The picture of the ducklings is evidence of nesting in Lowndes County that I found, and then several photographers have photographed them with offspring on Bluff Lake here in Noxubee County. at the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge. So they are nesting here as well. All right, so we have introduced species, the doves I mentioned, natural expansion of some of these. Of course, we have range collapses, and most of this is human activity. And the classic examples, of course, are these, the passenger pigeon, which used to blacken the sky with their numbers, the Carolina parakeet. A lot of people don't realize we used to have a native parakeet in North America, and of course the Eskimo curlew. They were all documented by John James Audubon, and of course through human hunting and so forth, they were become extinct and extirpated, which is unfortunate. So that's just examples of human activity. And then, we have birds that just show up out of nowhere. Some are just off course for whatever reason. Others are influenced by weather, you'll see, and then some they're just inexplicable as to why they're here. And this is one of those. This is a crazy vagrant. This is a Eurasian bird, the citrine wagtail, and you can see the picture was from a fellow in Pakistan. Well, in 1992, our Terry Schieffer in Occidental Audubon Society found one of these at the Starkville Sewage Lagoon, and I believe it was the first record ever in this part of the world. And there's been a few found since in other parts of the United States. I think we're up to 3 or 4 records of them. No one's sure why they're so far off track, but the map to the right shows you where they winter down in India and other parts of South Asia, and then the greenish area shows you where they sort of spend their summertime north of there. So it's an unusual bird, and no one knows how in the world they got here, but they did. They do have wings, and they get caught in some bad weather. Who knows how they get here? But that's really a frequent. It's not one you would expect to find, and Terry was able to find one. Now, hurricanes often do bring pelagic birds, and so you need to realize there are birds that spend most of their lives out on the ocean. When they're not flying in the air, they're often floating on flotsam or seaweed mats, or they're floating directly on the water. But many of them spend their entire life on the wings. So, for example, frigate birds and sooty tern and parasitic jaeger, all 3 of these birds were found inland and were associated with the storm Hurricane Laura. And you notice how that storm wrapped kind of over our area here in Starkville. These birds tended to be on the right side, the east side of the storm, and so people around the Jackson Reservoir, the Ross Barnett Reservoir, were able to see sooty tern and magnificent frigate bird down there. I believe sooty tern was also seen at one of the other reservoirs further up north. And then this parasitic jaeger was actually seen at Pickwick Lake up near the Tennessee border. And what was really cool is the person who saw the parasitic jaeger actually saw it eating a storm petrel, and I forgot which one. I don't know if it was Wilson storm petrel, which is also another pelagic bird. The parasitic jaeger was just attacking the petrel over and over and over, and they believed it was trying to kill it to eat it. So all of those birds were swept out of the ocean during a hurricane, and they came inland, and sometimes they spend a few days. Like the sooty tern down at Ross Barnett stayed for a few days before it finally returned to the ocean. So storms can bring birds in from strange places. And then another phenomenon that you may not be aware about as a new birder is that for the last 35 years or so, certain species of hummingbirds that normally winter in South Central America, Mexico, Central America, and South America, for some reason, many of them are actually spending the winter along the I-10 corridor in the southern part of the United States, from the coastal parts of Texas through Louisiana, along the Florida Panhandle, and into Jacksonville, Florida, is where most of these birds can be found. When I lived in Baton Rouge for many years, I had 9 species of these hummingbirds come to my feeders during the wintertime, and all of these species were seen. I had Calliope rufus hummingbird, I had black-chinned hummingbird, and Anna's hummingbird at my feeders in Baton Rouge. And let's see, I think all of these are males I'm showing here in these photographs, except for the bird in the middle with the rufus. That is actually a rufus female, a doe rufus female, that was found in Mayhew, Mississippi a few years ago, and it spent the winter here. It stayed I forgot how many months, 4 or 5 months throughout the entire winter, and we were able to go view it many times. It only was here one winter; it didn't come back the next winter. No one knows why these birds have changed their wintering habits, but they seem to be increasing numbers and becoming more and more reliable as wintering birds down on the coast anyway. But it's not unusual to find these winter birds in our area. So although most people are taking their feeders down in October, it still might be a good idea to leave your feeders up during the winter time here, and you might snag one of these birds. They're fun to watch. So just to review, birds are abundant, but they're very diverse, and their diversity is controlled by geography, as well as habitat within those locations. And of course, we have seasonal changes in bird density, and then the movements related to migrations and storm events and those kind of things. And so it kind of makes birding exciting. When you become a birder, you'll actually get used to the rhythms, the seasonal rhythms and the migrational rhythms of the birds, and it actually becomes like clock for you. It becomes innate. Hey, you'll start to say, hey, boy, this is the time of year I should start seeing this species or that species. And and the longer you do it, the more familiar you are with the bird and the changes in birds that occur. And that's part of the fun of the hobby of looking for birds. Um, I just want to give a shout out to groups that might help you in your birding journey. The Mississippi Ornithological Society is a statewide organization of bird enthusiasts. They generally have two annual meetings. One's a spring meeting. It's usually held down at the Gulf Coast, oftentimes at the Audubon Center at Pascagoula. There's a fall meeting that it varies in its venue location. This year it's going to have to be virtual via Zoom because of COVID. They often have special workshops. They have a newsletter and a publication called the Mississippi Kite. They are also the ones that house the Bird Records Committee. These are the people who evaluate observations and evidence of observations to say whether or not a bird was seen in Mississippi or not, especially a rare bird. And they also run a list service. This is a very convenient thing to be part of. It's a mail listserv where members share their birding experiences. You know, someone else will say, hey, I just saw a certain falcon that's rare, and I saw it here, and if you want to go see it, go by this road sign and turn left to go 4 blocks, and it'll be on the stump, 50 yards from the road. That kind of information can be shared on these list services. They also have a Facebook page, which I think I forgot. Oh, I mentioned that's their website, and they also have a Facebook page as well. Your local Audubon Society is the Octibah Audubon Society. We have sort of canceled all our activities due to COVID, but when we are active, we have field trips on the first Saturday of every month. We have meetings on the second Thursday in those months. We participate in various bird counts. Now we're still doing the bird counts. We're just trying to do it socially distanced and safe. So we're going to do the Christmas bird count this year. We just finished the fall migration count, and then the spring and rookery counts are done earlier in the year. You can find us, our website is sort of defunct right now. We need to get it up and running, but you can find us on Facebook. We're a closed group there. If you want to join us, just ask to join, and I'll approve you, and you can join. And we communicate about birds and things and events there as well. With that, I'll take any questions you have. Thank you for your time.